I don't mean to scare you guys with this thought, but what if this book was orange? Or green? Okay, look, basically it's time to talk Scarlet Violet DLC, because we know a lot. Alrighty then, fellow Pokemon trainers, welcome, buckle up, and settle in, because there's a lot of good stuff to talk about. When it comes to the Scarlet and Violet DLC, there's a lot going on. We know it definitely exists, we know it's definitely happening, there is enough, let's say, leakage to make that claim, as well as plenty of in-game hints and information given to set up more story, and of course, you're not going to not put out DLC for the game that sold 10 million copies in 3 days. Likely multiple. It pretty much is taking the place of the third game, as we saw with Sword and Shield. In any case then, well, let's recap what we currently know before expanding upon it. Every Pokemon game needs a third of the Legendaries, a unifying force, you know, the Rayquaza back in the day, or the likes of Eternatus, Necrozma more recently. And for us in Scarlet and Violet, that is going to be the Pokemon that originated, created, whose energy generates the terrestrialization phenomenon. We've had enough of that hinted by Ku, a very reliable and accurate hinter of things with his riddle. The odd one out here is Mega Evolution, as the only one without a legendary Pokemon tied to its inception. We also have the evil spooky eyes on the crown of terrestrializing that happens every time, which are of course the eyes belonging to, or at least hinting at, the Pokemon to do with it. On top of the book down in Area 0 in the first research station, literally talking about the Pokemon that created terrestrializing and what it is, with just its name simply redacted. This one is pretty much a slam dunk, and there is very little reason to believe we won't be getting a Terra Origin Legendary come the DLC. Then, to move on, we have, of course, the hints in the Scarlet and Violet book. We have the new Paradox Legendaries. In Scarlet's case, the combination of the 3 legendary dogs in this beautiful specimen, and in Violet's case, the combination of Virizion, Cobalion, and Terrakion in this one, which also honestly looks really cool, and I'm very excited for both of these. Very clear hints to a lot more going on and in and down in Area 0. But, of course, we have much more than that to look at. Then we have Mr. Totally Not Evil in the form of Heath, who is the author of the Scarlet and Violet book, and he is very much of interest. The reason being is, once again, Ku has sent us in his direction with this little poll, and it very much implies that Heath is going to have a bigger role in the game. In fact, there is files pointing to him having dialogue, and the idea of him being the villain of the DLC, the one that has disappeared into Area 0, has been living there this entire time, aging slower from the energy, wanting to harness or capture or do something with the Origin Terra Pokemon. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and definitely would be a good villain to tie into what we've already experienced, while obviously also offering something new when it comes to Area 0. Talking of Area 0 then, and the terrestrializing origin Pokemon, and indeed the themes at play, there is very much a hexagonal theme, isn't there? This crystal dome that is the dome of the Terra Origin Pokemon, well, just look at it. 6 connecting lines, a hexagon is a shape that... And while that by itself might not be that meaningful, when we look at a certain Zygarde, who also is represented by hexagons, we might have a potential candidate for at least a paradox version of him to be the originator. There is definitely more room to explore with him, and I feel like there does need to be a little bit more with him. He really didn't get enough of a spotlight, even despite his 10% incomplete forms. But more than that, he obviously ties into Kalos, and X and Y next year, it's their 10th anniversary. That's pretty on point if we are going to indeed return to Kalos in the DLC. But there's much more than that to actually point to it. If we have a Kalos, Zygarde, Paradox, Terra Origin, Hexagon, Legendary Boy, we'd also want to explore a bit of Kalos in the process, wouldn't we? And well, we literally have that. At the top right of the map, as we all know by now, there is this unexplorable chunk, and while it just looks like a big plain mountain, of course it's going to. It's quite literally a placeholder, a place mountain, and this is Kalos. It literally is Kalos, because Kalos is connected to Paldea. Kalos is France, and Paldea is Spain, and when you overlay the maps, I mean, you get this pretty clear area where this would be on the Paldean map, this southern Kalos, which is an area we didn't get to explore in X and Y, and would be the perfect mini post-game DLC area for us to continue the story in, while also tying in the X and Y themes, the 10-year anniversary, and bringing back some much-loved Pokemon. It also does help support the Zygarde hexagonal shenanigans. Then we have a few more little bits to go over, in the fact that there is 3 Pokemon trainers next to this Kalos section connector of the map, and all of them have big important Pokemon from Kalos. There is a Noivern, a Goodra, and finally a Dragalge. If that's not a little hint, then I don't know what is in terms of this being Kalos related. So clearly, the general theme of the DLC is going to be deeper into Area Zero, the Terra Origin Pokemon, a influence of Kalos, and a perhaps new Kalos-based area to explore, and really expanding the world of Scarlet and Violet and Paldea. But there is even more to talk about. Yes, indeed, it just keeps going. And while we're on the X and Y Kalos injection, recently the trademark for Pokemon X and Pokemon Y has been renewed, has been reclaimed, which is mightily random, isn't it? Maybe a little bit suspicious, and I imagine it's not a coincidence given how everything is pointing to, yes, getting a Kalos injection in our Scarlet and Violet DLC, so that's very exciting. We have this. It is a perhaps Easter egg, perhaps made up, perhaps nothing at all, but when you get asked at the start of the Elite Four, what academy, we have the Violet Academy, we have the Scarlet Academy, but there is a third option. Either this is completely just made up for the sake of the question, or there is actually some merit to the Manzana Academy, which is Spanish for apple, being an academy that exists, perhaps tied to the DLC. But where would it be? We know that the Naranja and the Uber Academy, the Scarlet and Violet, occupy the same place. They're just in slightly alternate, different parallel dimensions, depending on if you have Scarlet or Violet. It's different versions of the same world. And there is something to actually hone in on. Different versions of the same world. This is where I want to talk about Geeta, and how she might very much likely have a bigger role in the DLC. She's obviously been to Area Zero, she has Glimora, that's where it's from, and honestly, she's kind of a really garbage champion, like her team is really weirdly laid out and set up, but she also has 2 Kalos Pokemon in Avalugg and Go-Goat, so that's another hint there that she's been to Kalos or has connections to it that might be explored in a Kalos-based DLC. And yes, you can get those 2 Pokemon in Paldea itself, but they're kind of really weird, bad choices for the champion of new region. Why does she not use all new Pokemon? I have to believe there's a deeper meaning to it. But more than that, if we actually have her perhaps turn surprise villain, or have more battles, or have her actually do more in the DLC, we could actually have a version of her team that is a proper threatening fight, which might explain why she's a little bit underwhelming. Perhaps that's not just bad design, but a deliberate choice. Or perhaps I'm giving too much credit to the biggest selling franchise of all time doing a sandwich eating animation, which is a still image in the background. But irrelevant of that, when you fight her in the Academy Ace tournament, she says something a little bit kinda classically villainy. She says this is extremely close to what I would call my ideal world. And she also gives you the Terra Blast TM. So between that and Glimora, she definitely has connections to the crater and perhaps the origin Terra Pokemon. But the thing is, what if she's visited both the world of Scarlet and Violet? What if she has actually experienced different dimensions of the same world? What if Paradox Pokemon aren't time travel based? What if the machine they created they thought was time travel but is actually sending Pokeballs to alternate universes where things are a little bit different? Where one there's more prehistoric looking Pokemon and one it's a future version where Pokemon have always been robots and they've just assumed it's a time travel thing. But what if it's a dimensional travel, a parallel universe, a slightly different take on reality that's going on here? And Geeta is somehow in on that, and that's why she calls this world the almost perfect world. That would be quite the plot twist too, if terrestrializing energy actually was able to power some sort of parallel dimensional travel type thing. I realize we're kind of getting a little bit into the old tinfoil hat territory here, but it's certainly something to think about and gives us room to play with. Finally, for a most recent brand new reveal, or at least a fairly recent one, we have what is likely Nemona's parents in a character called Billy and a character called Onair. Yes, Billy Onair, they are supposedly quite rich. They probably have a Golden Go or a Meowth or, you know, Pokemon themed like that. And supposedly, yes, they are Nemona's parents. She mentions that they're not here at the moment. She mentions that they are quite rich. And it wouldn't be ridiculous for them to reappear in the DLC and actually have something to do with an expanded Nemona story as we go into that. So it's definitely something to mention and to think about how that might tie in. So, when are we likely to get this actually announced and on the ball rolling? Well, if we go by Sword and Shield, it'll be January, but that seems premature, especially with so many issues in the game still to fix. So, of course, the usual suspect is Pokemon Day at the end of February, and that's where I'd have to place my money if I had to place it. Other than that, then, you're pretty much caught up on everything at DLC. A deeper dive into the crater, a returning villain in Heath from the past, Terra origin Pokemon, maybe a reveal that Paradox isn't at all what we thought they were, Geeta getting involved, Nemona's parents getting involved, the Kalos connection, potentially something Zygarde, definitely a new area in Kalos to explore, something coming from there, and generally expanding the game significantly than what we have now. Oh, alright, I hope you enjoyed that, going through it, and now being up to speed. Watch this space for any more DLC-ness that gets revealed and discovered. I will, of course, bring you it in post-haste. For now then, like if you enjoyed this, let me know your thoughts on the theories and what we know. Subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, oh goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.